This is the Chopped Podcast, episode number 2. Wow. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me today. I am super excited because today I'm sharing my interview with the super fun, talented, and did I say fun? Yeah. Anyway, the fun couple, Bjork and Lindsay Ostrom of Pinch of Yum and Food Blogger Pro. This is the second episode of Chopped Podcast. Wow, we're on a roll. This podcast is designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. I know I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating. Food is such an important topic. It's in our everyday lives, and it connects people in such a huge way. And I think that's why we're here talking to food bloggers, helping them create that community and connection with their readers. So Chopped Podcast, we're interviewing people that are food bloggers that have things to share. Maybe it's about food photography, maybe it's about creating an editorial calendar, or perhaps it's about how to write things in a way that really reaches to people. The goal is to create some order out of all the chaos that we know to be food blogging, to figure out what works, and to maybe a little bit about what doesn't. So I'm excited to share with you my interview today with Bjork and Lindsay Ostrom. You know them, right? Yeah, I think so. She's the amazing blogger behind the site Pinch of Yum, and he's the amazing talent behind the site Food Blogger Pro. Although, to be completely honest, I don't think it's that neat and tidy. I think they probably share roles in both sites, but it just feels nice to compartmentalize it that way. Lindsay and Bjork and I talk about how Pinch of Yum got its start. It's kind of interesting. Why they began sharing their monthly income reports and their statistic reports, which I know we all love. Their productivity hacks, their passion for the concept of 1% infinity. In fact, Bjork shares some great baseball analogies here, which equates to you don't have to hit a home run every time you go to the plate. And Lindsay follows that up by saying, just showing up every day. It's like just walking to the plate and hitting a single can make a difference. And that's actually the kind of 1% improvement that leads to huge improvements and results over time. So we talk about that, and we also have some talk about some fun stuff, like, for example, how Bjork got his name. Aren't you curious? And their favorite TV shows. What else did we talk about? Oh, yeah, cat videos. I bet you didn't expect that one. I didn't. But we had fun. So one quick thing before the interview I want to share with you guys. Something else that I'm really excited about. If you're interested in learning more about food blogging in a fun, creative, and supportive, and let me repeat that, supportive environment, and if you're interested in meeting other great food bloggers, then mark your calendars, get your calendar out right now, and write down October 16th and plan to come to Chopped Conference. It's a food blogging conference right here in the heart of the country, Kansas City. I just have to read the mission of Chopped Conference for you because, I don't know, I just get tingles every time I read it. It's really cool. The mission of Chopped Conference is to bring together different communities of people with a passion for food around the core ideas of love, family, and community, and finding ways to share that via blogging to a larger audience. If this sounds like something that's interesting to you, sign up for the newsletter at choppedcon.com so you'll be the first one to know when the tickets are on sale. Okay, are you ready to hear from Lindsay and Bjork? I sure hope so, because let's get right to it. Here's my interview with food bloggers and all-around awesome people, Bjork and Lindsay Ostrom. Okay, welcome Lindsay and Bjork Ostrom to today's show.
Hey Marley, we're super excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great. So glad to have you. Well, I was so thrilled to get to meet you two in person last year at Chopped Conference. It was great.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it, Marley. It was one of those things where being bloggers, you kind of realize that your life lives and operates in kind of like a 2x2 square foot vicinity. Mm-hmm. So it was fun for us to get out of the house and meet people and speak, and it was a really good thing. So thanks for the invite. It was awesome.
Well, we were thrilled to have you, and I thought the energy in the room was really great, and really, I agree with you. It's so easy to sit behind your computer and forget how wonderful people can be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, the question that's really been, I love your site, Pinch of Yum, and, you guys share such great recipes and lots of great tips and things for bloggers. But one thing that's really intrigued me about you guys is, where did you come up with the name Pinch of Yum?
Yeah, Lindsay, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a really cool or funny story behind it or anything other than that. I mean, I still remember where we were when we had the conversation. We were talking about starting a blog, and we were probably sitting on our old hand-me-down couch in our first little apartment that we lived in, and of course, when you're starting a blog, there's a lot of different things to think about and in terms of getting your site up and all of that. But for me, the most fun thing to think about was, what am I going to call it? Like, what's the name going to be? And we wanted something that could be broad enough where we wouldn't feel locked into a certain type of food if we decided to kind of change gears later on. So we wanted to keep it fairly broad. And, it's like you want it to be memorable and you want it to be kind of a sticky URL that you can say to people without it being too long or anything like that. But there was nothing really special about like Pinch of Yum necessarily, other than that, of all the, potential blog names on our list, it was probably, one of the ones that was actually available. And so we just kind of picked it and went with it. And I suppose that's not a very exciting story of picking a name, but that's how we did it.
Well, no, sometimes it's not so dramatic, but it is challenging because a lot of good names are already taken.
Right, for sure. And I know that was one of the big, drivers in that was we would think of a great name and we'd be super excited about it. And then we would go to check if the URL was available and it wasn't. So
yeah.
Kind of limiting in that way.
Or sometimes the .com is not available, but the .net is, and then that's a big decision you have to make as well.
Right, for sure.
Or .co.uk.
Yeah. Or .biz. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but I think it's fairly serendipitous that this happened. But when I start to type in Pinterest, because Pinch of Yum and Pinterest have the same beginning letters, Pinch of Yum comes up.
Awesome.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, huh?
Really cool. Pinterest for us is such a huge traffic driver. I suppose they go hand in hand, like you said, serendipitous.
Maybe that's why.
We did not
Maybe
plan
that's why.
It's just, we did not plan that, but lucky for us.
Yes, exactly. So tell me a little bit more about the story of why you started this food blog.
Yeah, well, at the time, I was just cooking for us, for Bjork and I. We had just gotten married when I kind of got my first teaching job, and Bjork was working for a nonprofit, and cooking was just kind of a hobby that I had. And one of the things I really enjoyed and that I found I would enjoy is I would come home from work and be really excited to find recipes online. And then I always wanted to share them. So I was always going on Facebook, was really the only social media I was using at that time. And I would just share the link to the recipe that I had made or a picture or something. But it kind of came to the point where I was like, wow, I'm really enjoying this weird amount of sharing about food on Facebook. And so Bjork and I kind of started the conversation about what it would be like to start a blog. And I had never really known or, I had heard of blogs, but never read a blog, never really used a blog or didn't have any kind of concept of what that was all about. So together, we just he was like, well, this is what I know about blogs, and let's see if we can do this, and it might be a fun hobby. And that's kind of how it started. It was really rough in its beginning stages. It definitely wasn't something where right out of the gate we were serious about it and wanted to kind of build it into something. It was more oh, this is a fun little website, and maybe in 2 months I'll post on it again or something like that. But it was, I'm glad it had started that way because it was just purely for fun. It was just 100% for fun because I liked cooking and sharing about cooking. So
it seems like that's a story I hear in a lot of well-known blogs, or maybe it's just the story of a lot of blogs that they start out as a hobby.
Yeah, and I think too, just to jump in here real quick, I think part of it is when people start out, not necessarily because they love doing it, but because they want it to be a thing, it's really easy for that to fizzle. And so and you hear people talk about this a lot, but the idea of working in your passion, especially when you are the one that has to be motivated to create the content. A huge reason for that is because, man, if you're doing it just to create an income or to build a blog as a business, which is a great thing to do. But if that's the only purpose that you're doing it, it's so easy to get burnt out because it's so much work to maintain a website or a blog. And so, like Lindsay said, I think it's nice for both of us that it kind of started as that passion piece, and well, especially for Lindsay with the food and cooking and all of that, as opposed to like, hey, we're going to build this into a business. Not that that's bad. I think it's just a lot harder to do when that's your intent right away.
It's interesting because I think it sounds a little bit like a diet. If you start a diet just to lose weight, you're probably not going to stick with it. But if you start it because you want to be this healthier person, or if you have these other bigger motivations, I think that helps.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah. Now, I know you guys traveled a lot before, you started the blog, and I'm curious if that had anything to do with, this passion you had for sharing recipes.
So when we started the blog, since we were just married, I mean, really the only travel we had done together at that point was like going on our honeymoon to Mexico, which I did eat some really delicious food on that honeymoon, and I still can recall all the delicious food that we had. But we actually spent a year, after the blog was started, we spent a year in the Philippines, and we were living there and kind of took the blog with us, not knowing if it would be able to survive with, only having access to Filipino type of ingredients, or, if that would even be sustainable with this new lifestyle that we were living in the Philippines. But kind of to our surprise, when we moved to the Philippines, I mean, that year, that was like 2012 to 2013, that was a really big year for Pinch of Yum, and that was when, for the first time, like, the traction that we were getting in terms of the income we were able to generate was surpassing, what I was making from my day job. And I wasn't, in terms of the recipes specifically, I really wasn't making like a lot of Filipino food or anything that was influenced by our time there, as much as it was just like limited by whatever I could find there. It's funny because like you move to a new place or you're in a new place, at least for me, what happened is I felt like, I'm going to make all this Filipino food. But then when you're there for a long time, you are homesick and you're kind of tired, and like all you really want is familiar food, like macaroni and cheese or whatever. So it's funny because sometimes when I think about going back, I think, if we went back, I'd be a lot more adventurous, with my food and my eating. But I did get a few recipe posts in during the year that we were there that were about Filipino food, and I think that was a fun element of story for Pinch of Yum, where people were able to come along with us on that journey and, maybe try some of the new things or at least see some of the new things that we were trying. And I think that added some flavor, so to speak, to the blog and its story.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because I think you guys shared about what you all were doing, and I think that story really did, it's intriguing, and it adds to the, like you say, the flavor of the site.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leads me to a question I want to ask you, Lindsay, because, as you presented at Chopped, you guys were talking about taking your food blog from good to great. I loved that presentation. It was great.
Thanks.
I thought you mentioned a lot about teaching, and since you have this background in teaching, it seems to come natural to you, this, this desire to teach as a part of your blog. And I'm curious if you could go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I think it's like there are multiple layers to it, and for me, it's obviously not only it's like my personality reinforces my belief of that it's a good thing because I like to teach. So it's like, that works out well for me. I like to teach, and so then I say, people should teach on their blog. But yeah, kind of like conveniently lines up there. But I think like in terms of the food and the cooking, I've just found blogging in general to be the most rewarding when I feel like I'm giving people something that's making their life better. And it's not necessarily teaching in a traditional sense, but giving them an idea or an inspiration to, try a new recipe or try a new way of cooking. And that to me at the very basic, like core level, feels a little bit like teaching. And it's really the most rewarding part to me. But then also I think on another layer, there's like the business level of it. And I think Bjork has known this all along, and I've only more recently kind of figured this out. But just in terms of the products that we create, a lot of what we've found over the last 5 years is that what people really resonate with is like information and something that when they can take information and then apply it to their own situation, whether that be a blog or a business or just life in general, that's really what is valuable to people and what keeps people coming back. So with my first ebook that I wrote, it was called Tasty Food Photography, and I remember when I was writing it, I thought, I'm not ready to do this book about photography. Like I think I'm really just going to stick with, a cookbook or whatever, something a little bit more traditional. But I decided to go for the photography book, and Bjork, had kind of encouraged me to do that. And we just see that being so much more successful than our other products or like other e-cookbooks that I have. And I think specifically that's because it's teaching a skill, and it feels like it's something compelling and really valuable to people. They have a need for this knowledge, and then they can come, and with the click of a button, they can then access that knowledge. So I've just found teaching, that's kind of in a nutshell, but I've just found like teaching, whether it's more for the heart of the blog or actually for the business of the blog, it's just a really powerful angle to take, even with a food blog.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it kind of takes you back to that concept of how important it is to give, and in some ways, teaching is like giving.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Bjork, I've got a question for you then, and maybe both of you, but I'm just thinking about you. Does that mean that Pinch of Yum has two markets? Because you have the market that is there for the recipes, but then you've got this market that's also coming to, find out how to be a better food photographer.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think it's an important one for the people that are listening to think about, because I think usually as like bloggers or website owners, or even like a nonprofit or business, like anybody that has access to like the analytics of a business, usually what we do is we look at those and we say, hey, we had 900 people come to the site yesterday. I think that's a great place to start, but it's even more important, I think, to drill down and say, like, what type of visitors are those? And so for Pinch of Yum, like you said, Marley, like there's really two types of visitors. There's probably more. We could get more detailed with it, but there's people that are coming for the recipe, where they'll come and their like main transaction that they're looking to complete is like, I need a recipe to make for my family tonight. And so what they do is they search, maybe it's Pinterest, maybe it's Google, maybe they have that bookmarked. They come, they print it off, or they, have their iPhone when they're cooking and they pull it up. And at that point, their information seeking is fulfilled and the transaction is complete. So that's kind of one visitor. But then, like you said, there's this other visitor where the transaction with them or the information they're seeking is a little bit more complicated and it's not quite as simple. And it usually has to do with, in this case, some type of skill or improving their ability to do something, or maybe having a better understanding of a certain element. The example that we gave, or that you gave, was food photography. So that's a really vast, huge subject that people are on an ongoing basis and probably never completely done with searching about. And those people are really valuable visitors because the need is, in some sense, the need is great, and it's not as accessible necessarily. So recipes are really, really accessible in all sorts of different places, and usually people are able to separate themselves from like the source, where it's like a good recipe could live on a really crummy site.
Yes.
But when it's more of the informational stuff, like learning about food photography, it's a little bit harder to separate that, where if you go to learn about food photography and it's on a site that doesn't feel very, artistic or creative, or has really bad photographs, it's a little bit harder to separate that. So there's definitely two different types of users, and I think that, what we do is we try and have a conversation with both of those people simultaneously without ever making one feel completely like an outcast, or like we're not talking to them, which isn't easy, but it's what we attempt to do.
Well, I think you've done a great job with it, and I think it probably helps that you do have, and for people who don't know, you have Pinch of Yum, but you also have this other site, the membership site. Bjork, can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the Cliff Notes version is that about 3.5 years ago, Lindsay and I started this experiment where we were going to try and turn Pinch of Yum essentially into a business. And at that point, I guess we wouldn't even have said that. I think looking back, it's easy to say that. Mm-hmm. But we tried this experiment where we're like, hey, maybe we could create an income from this blog or this website. So I'd come on and do a report each month and say, hey, here are the things that were working, here are the things that didn't work, and essentially do like a recap, kind of a state of the blog, a monthly state of the blog. And we called those traffic and income reports. And there's other people that do those, so it wasn't like this revolutionary thing, but it was a way for us to like keep accountable to the audience and to ourselves for improving the blog. And as we continue to do those and grow the site, we had a lot of people that came to us and said, you know, how do you do fill in the blank? Whether it be use a certain plugin or figure out SEO or even just the basics of like setting up a blog. And so we realized there was some type of need there. And from that, we created Food Blogger Pro, which is a membership site for food bloggers. They can sign up. At this point, it's $29 a month and go through, you know, we have 300 video tutorials that cover the stuff that we feel like is most important, and then a community forum. And then we also have this nutrition label generator where you can take ingredients and drop them in and then just press a button and it analyzes it and creates a nice little nutrition facts label that you can easily download.
How cool. Did you design that?
Yeah. You know, I designed it, and then we worked with a developer, and then they hook in, this is maybe deeper than you want to know, but they hook into an API that is used by like Whole Foods and things like that to grab the information for the different ingredients.
How cool.
So and the design wasn't too crazy, but the development was, which is why I had nothing to do with it. So those are the three things of parts of Food Blogger Pro. That really came as a result, though, of hearing people coming to us and say, hey, can you help us with all of these different things? So that's kind of the resource that we created from it. And it's been awesome. It's been a growing business, and there's super cool people that are part of the community, and we've just been honored to be a part of it as it's grown.
Do you find an average user, like is it usually a beginner, or is it just kind of from all over as far as food bloggers?
Yeah, you know, I think that the average user is also probably the average blogger, which is the person that's in their first, like, I would say it's starting out to first 2 years. But then we also have a handful of bloggers that are part of the community that have been doing it for, 5, 6, 7 years. But the reality, I think, is just there's fewer of those bloggers in general. Right. But there's a story of one blogger that was part of Food Blogger Pro and had discovered Pinch of Yum and kind of some of the income stuff that we talk about for building a blog. And she had like 4 or 5 million page views a month and was still working her normal job and came and said, hey, I guess I realize this is something that I can be doing more with. So occasionally we'll hear from people that are like super awesome Uber bloggers that maybe haven't really 100% like figured out the monetization stuff. But usually it's the average user, kind of the target market for Food Blogger Pro would be the people that are like getting started and just kind of trying to figure it out. It's interesting because it's how do you even define the average user in the blogging world? Because, if time is your metric, or is it, how many followers they have, or, but mostly I think what I'm hearing you say is it's people who want to monetize. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I think that, in some sense, it's not people that want to monetize necessarily. I think it's people that want to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times the easiest metric for that is income. But there's also the reality of like people want to feel good about the photos they're taking, or people want to break out of like a plateau for traffic that they're hitting. And I think that income is a piece of that. Like, hey, I'm creating an income from this, but I feel like that's like the surface level, where the deeper level is like, hey, I want to feel like I'm improving, that I'm getting better, that I'm connecting with people. I think that's a big part of it too. I just think the income thing is like, a lot of times it's the easiest metric to measure, but I think usually it's the surface as opposed to like the root. So I think that's a piece of it, but probably not the like ultimate answer.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point, because that's one thing that food blogs, or probably any blog in general, allows you the opportunity to do, and that is to grow. It seems like there's always something to learn.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too with the metrics is like, when you have a website or blog, especially when you're first getting started, you wear 42,900 hats that you have to change throughout the day, where it's like photography and recipe development and food styling and, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that's involved with it. And everybody is really excited about certain elements of that and not so excited about other elements.
Yeah. And Lindsay, you're such a great teacher as far as the food photography goes, because if I recall, I think you're self-taught.
Yeah, well, yeah, I am. I am self-taught.
And I just think that gives you such an edge because you really know the kinds of, I don't know, like you seem to kind of get that, most people are trying to do this from their home. So you're talking about what gadgets you have around your house that can make you a better food photographer.
Yes, right. And that's like one of the, going back to teaching and all that, it's one of the most rewarding things for me is when people read Tasty Food Photography or even just some of the stuff that we have for free on Pinch of Yum about photography, and they'll say, oh, I've read so many different photography books and I couldn't understand them, or they were too heady, and your book just made sense to me. And so I feel like that's one advantage of being self-taught and like going from zero, coming from zero knowledge. I feel like I understand what's confusing to the average person who's trying to learn food photography. So yeah,
it really comes across. It's great.
Thanks.
I'm curious, Lindsay, do you ever feel like you have a food blogger living inside of your head? Like sometimes I'm just making a cup of tea and I start ticking off these, how to make the perfect cup of tea. And it's like, just stop.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's part of it is the food and part of it is the photography and then part of it is just like the writing. And I think the writing is like the most tangible thing, but sometimes like I've had friends who say this too, but like I start to like narrate things around me in my head, it's not even necessarily related to food, but I'm just like starting to draft things, draft new posts and new stories and whatever in my head, or, everywhere I go, I see a potential post. So yes, definitely.
How do you do that? Do you ever, like, sometimes I'll sit at the computer and I'm just blank.
You mean like just with the writing and the stories?
Yeah. Do you have a place where you kind of write down some ideas?
It's funny that you asked because I've actually just I don't know if it was literally just yesterday, I was thinking about that. There's an author that I follow that Shauna Nyquist, but one of the blog posts she just did recently was about stocking the pond, she called it. And so she would take all her different ideas and just say, basically, you have to have a full pond if you want to go fishing for these ideas or stories. And so she would keep a notebook with her and always write down, anything that she would think of that could be a potential to write about. I don't do that, but I have them kind of in my head. And I was just thinking literally yesterday, I was like, you know what, I need to just start writing some of these down, because sometimes that does happen to me where I sit down at the computer and I don't have anything that I feel like, goes along with what I'm trying to write about with the food. But I know that over the last week or so, I've had lots of different ideas coming in and out of my head. So I think part of that is like developing a holding tank system for those kind of fleeting ideas that just come in a random moment. And I don't have a good system for that yet, but I'm thinking about it. So
recently, I just started I just created a notes in my notes section of my phone, or the notes app.
Yep.
And I just created one called writing ideas. And so I just put them in there. Even if I'm watching a show and they say something I think sounds kind of cool, like the Gilmore Girls, they said something about 50 Shades of Purple. And I don't know why I thought that was really, really funny. So I wrote that down. Yeah. So you never know where it's going to strike.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just curious what a day in the life looks like at the Pinch of Yum headquarters. Is there a day, a typical day?
I think so. It's probably a little bit different for each of us.
Does it start with you shoveling yourself out of all that snow?
Yeah, right. Do you want me to go first here? We're in different locations if people didn't catch on. So Lindsay and I are kind of like passing questions back and forth over Skype. Do you want me to talk a little bit, Lindsay, and then you want to fill in?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Okay, great. So I think that, there's probably not a typical day, and at the same time there is a typical day. I think that if I were to like average them all out, probably what it would look like is, for me, I'll just speak specifically for me. I have like a borderline obsession with inbox zero. So I'll usually start my day by just clearing out email. And that involves the most time consuming part of that is just kind of monitoring the Food Blogger Pro forum. So we're just in the beginning stages of hiring on people that are going to be able to help with that, just because that ends up being a big part of it. But I usually start by doing that, and that can take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours by the time I'm all done. And there's projects intermingled and stuff within that. And then at that point, I usually jump over into like my task management application, which is called Things. And it's based off the Getting Things Done methodology by David Allen. And essentially the idea is like, Things is that, at least for me, like it's that holding tank where there's, once again, it's like 42,900 things that Things is holding. But what you do is you build your day out and say, okay, here are the things that I want to really hit today. And work on. So after going through email and getting to inbox zero, which of course, as you guys know, it's inbox zero for like 3 minutes and then it's not. But at that point, I'm just able to like turn it off and say, I'm going to be done with email for the day, and now I'm going to focus on projects. And then I'll work through projects, whatever those are at the time. Maybe it's a blog post, or maybe it's the monthly report for Pinch of Yum, or maybe it's prepping new material for Food Blogger Pro, things like that. So, and
you guys have your own separate offices, right? So
yeah, that was just recently. So we moved into this office space where I am right now in November. Is that right, Linz?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we moved into here in November. So sometimes Lindsay's over here. Usually I'm here and Lindsay's there doing, cooking or recipes or photography, and then I'm here just doing general computer geekness. And then, I don't know, like we'll usually wrap up, I'll usually head home, depending on what's going on, like 6 or 7. So they will start maybe 8 or 9 and get done 6 or 7. So we have a little bit later days. I don't know how in depth you want to go. We eat at 8:30, go to bed at midnight.
Yeah.
Shower at 6:45. I don't know. Would there be anything?
That's very thorough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
What about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I would say for me, I kind of, right now, what I've kind of settled on is like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of routine where I'll put together my posts kind of like any time that I'm making the food and photographing or whatever. I'll put all that stuff together and put it into the post. But I'm reserving my actual writing of the post for the post morning itself. So like if I have a post going on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is what I have right now, then those are kind of like my early writing mornings. And I get up on those days and I write the post, right before they literally are published and go out. So those, it's kind of a nice flow though for me because Monday, Wednesday, Friday then is the early day, and then Tuesday, Thursday is like a little more of a flexible start. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll spend the mornings writing, and then it kind of depends on the day beyond that. A lot of it, what I feel like I'm always trying to work on is like, I could be in my email all day, and I'm sure a lot of, bloggers, especially when you've been blogging for a while, that stuff just piles up, and comments and all that stuff. So I'm really trying to, kind of like Bjork was saying, to have a singular time a day that I check email. And I only am checking comments now really like once a week where I really thoroughly go with them. Usually it's like on a Monday night. And between that, I kind of just like fill in whatever I have for the week. I wanted to mention I used to use a cool planner or like a planner organizer thing. It was called the Day Designer. By Whitney English. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I really liked that. I used that last year, and then that really helped me to just map out what can sometimes feel like just it can feel really hard to get structure as a blogger and a food blogger because just stuff is just so weird that you're doing. Like I'm going to the grocery store in the middle of the day and it's for work, it's just weird stuff. So that was really helpful to me. And now this year I'm using the Passion Planner, which is a similar tool, but the reason I opted for that this year rather than the Day Designer is it looks at more of the week as a whole versus a single day, and I'm like chronically overscheduling myself. So with the day designer, I would just pack in every single thing into one day, and then I would feel disappointed every day that I wasn't getting enough done. And so to really have to look at the week as a whole, I think helps me to have a little bit of grace with myself and saying, like, you have a whole week. You don't have to get every single thing done in this one day. Like, space that out over the week and look a little bit more big picture. And usually I try to identify, and I know Bjork does this too, usually I try to identify like what's the one big thing today that I'm doing. And it's not email, and it's not comments, and it's not writing a post. It's like something above and beyond that. So, like this week we have some recording days, but it's hard. It's really, because it can be so easy to spend your whole day doing these kind of maintenance tasks like email, comments, and all that stuff. So we're working hard to kind of like push those maintenance tasks into the margins and or hire people on so that we can spend more of our actual daytime working hours doing those big projects that actually move us forward.
So Lindsay, that's a good point. I love that what you're saying there is how hard it can be when you're self-employed, working for yourself from home to stay on track. And that kind of leads me back to something that you guys said at Chopped Conference, which was about 1% infinity. That sounds like a complicated formula, but you guys explained it so well.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of my favorite concepts. And I think when we talk about it with other business owners or bloggers or really anybody, it really hits home. And the idea with 1% infinity, it can kind of be chopped, to use a buzzword. It can kind of be chopped into three different pieces where it's the 1% and then infinity. So 1, obviously we all understand what that is, the number 1%, the idea like it's just a little bit. So it's 1%, and then infinity is forever. And it's 1% infinity, meaning always improving just a little bit forever. And that, like you said, it ties into what Lindsay was saying, because a lot of times you can come to any sort of big problem, like how do I get better at photography, or how do I grow my blog, or how do I get healthier? Any of those things are really big problems and really big hurdles to jump. But when you dwindle it down to like just a little bit every day over a really long period of time, that can really have a huge impact. And one of my favorite, I don't know a lot of Tony Robbins quotes, but one that I read recently that I really appreciate, and this is going to be a paraphrase, not an exact quote, but he said that people drastically overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I think that's a perfect quote for people that are building a website or a blog, because I think a lot of times when you starting out, you have these huge expectations for where you want to be in a year, and you can be continually disappointed when you don't get there. But the huge win comes if you're able to sustain over a long period of time consistent and dedicated effort at improving and also continuing to create content. So that's the other piece with the blog. Like, you have to continue to put life into the blog, but not just create content to create content. It's like getting a little bit better every day. And you don't have to hit a home run, but you got to get to the plate every day. You have to swing, and you have to do your best to hit singles as opposed to home runs all the time. And that's the concept with 1% infinity, is that you're doing it for a long period of time. Your mindset isn't 1 year, it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And if you can do that while continually improving each and every day, like, there's a really high probability that you'll be successful in the long run.
Well, I like that baseball analogy, Bjork, because, those are professional players that get up there to the bat, and their a great average is what, 300?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So that means 7 times they're striking out out of 10.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yep. And they understand that too. Like, one of the things that's interesting is you look at some of the, best basketball players or, even football players, and it's like they're never doing 100%. They're a lot of times they're missing, over 50% of the shots that they take. And one of my favorite Michael Scott quotes, The Office.
Yeah.
Is when it's not a quote, but it's on the board. It's the Wayne Gretzky quote where it says, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take," and then it's Wayne Gretzky, and then that's the whole entire thing is a quote, and then it says Michael Scott underneath it. So it's like he's claiming the quote of the Wayne Gretzky quote.
I missed that. Yeah. That's too funny.
But it's really true, I think, in the sense that, like, you're going to have to miss quite a bit, and I think that's freeing for people when they know that there's going to be errors and there's going to be strikeouts, and the progress is going to be slow. But if it's done over a long period of time, then the general trend will be up.
That's great. And I thought of that, Lindsay, as you were speaking, because I could see where, when you're doing your blog, you could easily get into reaction mode. I got to respond to this email. I got to respond to this comment. I've got to respond to that. And then the next thing you know, you're not actually planning time to be into this creativity side of things and growing 1% in anything.
Right, for sure. And I think, I know for me with, the 1% infinity part of that, and this is basically a reiteration, but maybe from a more personal standpoint in terms of what Bjork was saying, but it just really, I don't know if it's bloggers or just some of us bloggers who are kind of like this, have this perfectionist tendency, or place these really, really, really high expectations on ourselves to publish all the time and publish a viral hit post every time you publish something. And it's then you do a post and it's wait, only 50 people shared that or liked that or whatever, instead of the thousands that you were hoping for. And it's just really easy. I feel like we just put such high expectation on publishers online. And I've been listening and reading a lot more about that lately, and just how that's kind of it's like a train, and it just keeps speeding up in terms of expectations that we have for ourselves. But it's just really powerful to think about that 1% infinity, and actually Bjork and I just watched this video, a Gary Vaynerchuk video that encouraged people by saying, 1 is greater than 0. It doesn't have to be a viral post every time, but do a post, and 1 is better than nothing. And so I think a lot of it is just it's just mindset, and it's a really powerful mindset to take, where you don't expect yourself to be perfect, and you don't expect yourself to do these superhuman blogger things, but just acknowledge that every time you show up, that's 1% better, and every time you show up and try something new, that's another 1% better, and over the long haul that yields great rewards.
So I've got a series of some fun questions to ask you here at the end of this interview. I want to ask Lindsay, what's your favorite part about blogging?
Oh, that's so hard. Like Bjork said, you wear so many different hats, and I really like a lot of them. But I think I can't. Oh, I feel weird not saying food. Obviously, I love food, but I really love the photography. It's just challenging enough to me, and I feel like it always keeps me on my feet. So there's always something to learn, always something to improve or change. That I really love the photography.
Okay, Bjork, I have to know, what's the story behind your name?
Yeah, that's great. So growing up, there was a family that my parents were really close to, and their last name was Bjork. So it was like the Bjorks, Jim and Linda Bjork, and then his siblings. And so they named me after their last name. So that's where it comes from.
It's funny that they have such a, average Jim and Linda, and Bjork seems kind of exotic. So.
Right, yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of times people assumed growing up that was my last name. Like it was one of those things where they'd either say, oh, Bjorn, I know somebody named Bjorn. I'd be like, no, it's Bjork. And then they're like, oh, is that your last name? I was like, no, that's my first name.
Okay, Lindsay, what's your favorite app on your phone?
Ooh, I have my phone right in front of me, so let me just look at my home screen. I would say, man, I hate to be predictable, but I love Instagram. I really love Instagram. I probably goes hand in hand with the photography answer, right? Like it's just a really fun place to look at other people's inspiring photos from all around the world. It's super fun. I love it.
I agree. There's something so, I don't know, it's just a great fix to go to Instagram.
Yes.
Okay, Bjork, do you have a favorite TV show that you watch?
We have, it's really been one that's like the ultimate, and then two kind of like a secondary, and I feel like it reveals our TV tendency. But this hasn't been for a while, but like we're pretty religious about The Office. So yes. We got done watching like the last season, and we're like so sad. It was actually when we were in the Philippines.
I definitely.
And then we just.
I just full out cried. Yeah. The season or the finale. Everything. Yeah, I was just sad.
Yeah.
So we're like, what are we gonna do now? And then so we just started it over. So we started back at season 1, and we're watching it. Which I hate watching anything more than once, except I've realized Office episodes, which I don't mind. And then Modern Family. We really like Modern Family a lot, and watch that. And then we have been watching State of Affairs, which is a new show.
I feel kind of embarrassed to say that, though, because it's like it gets really bad ratings, and it's not like a super, I don't know, I feel like it's not like a very good pick, a good TV pick, but we definitely like it and watch it, so it's embarrassing.
And then we do
it.
Yeah, we're laying it all on the table here.
No more.
As long as we're saying that, I'm just going to keep going with it. So we also watch a lot of like YouTube animal videos. So like,
oh my gosh,
like we're big fans of cat videos. I think we don't own a dog, but we really like pugs. So we really do we really go deep on pug videos, like to the ones that have like 97 views. So
40 pages back on YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what we like to watch in all forms of video media.
Yeah, that's the way too long answer.
I like that highbrow cat video. I mean, the ones that the cat won't let the dog pass, those just crack me up.
Yes, yep. And for everybody that is listening to this, one thing that everybody needs to do when they get home, if I was hanging out with you individual right now that's listening to this, one of the first things that I would do, no matter where we are, is ask you to pull up a video called Sail Cat, SAIL Cat. And then we would watch it together and we would laugh. So knowing that I might not meet the people that are listening to this, they can watch that and pretend that we are together.
Yeah.
I'll put the link in the show notes page so they can get to it.
Make sure it's at the very top so people don't miss it.
Yeah, most important thing.
It sounds like it's a high priority.
Yep.
Okay, so one last question for both of you, and I'll start with Lindsay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite music?
Oh, that's hard.
I know.
Okay, I'm going to say this. This is a little bit of a different answer. I'm going to say my favorite music is Bjork Ostrom music because he used to be a musician. So he produced a CD when he was in college, and
I saw that.
Travel and play shows, and so I'll just give a shout out to my honey there.
Because he plays both guitar and sings, right?
Yes, he does.
Impressive.
That's very nice of you, Lindsay. Thanks.
Yeah.
She scored some major points. I mean, this week of all week, it's kind of an important week to have.
Valentine's Day. There you go. That's it right there.
Oh, We're recording this on Valentine's week. That's
yes.
Yeah.
So Bjork, what about you? What's your favorite music?
This is like music that speaks to my core, but Bon Iver, or Bon Iver, I think some people pronounce it as that. But he's a Midwest musician from Wisconsin, and it's really like falsetto-y, folky acoustic music, and I feel like there's lyrics in it, but it's enough where they're like backgroundy enough where I can listen to it while I work. If it's like a Katy Perry song or something, it's like I can't concentrate.
Right.
But with his music, I feel like it's enough where I'm able to okay, I can really get some work done and like really enjoy it. I think when I find the right type of music, it makes work like twice as fun. And then I have a cup of coffee and then it like doubles that. So it's like 4 times as good.
So the coffee and the music together.
Coffee and the music, and then if I'm working on something I enjoy, it's kind of the ultimate.
And then if I'm there with you, then it's like really the ultimate.
Yeah, then it's squared, so it's 16 times as good as normal.
It's perfect.
Yeah. And then I put the YouTube videos on in the background, and then that's squared.
It's turning into a perfect day.
But I really like Bon Iver a lot, and I've probably listened to his 2 like regular albums like 300 times all the way through. So
that's awesome. Great. Yeah. So I know it seems like everybody knows where to find you guys, but where can people find you online?
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, well, pinchofyum.com is my blog, I guess our blog, my blog, whatever. And then I'm just on all the regular social channels. But since I did say my favorite is Instagram, I would love to find and connect with any listeners on Instagram. And my handle is just @pinchofyum.
How about you, Bjork?
Yeah, so Food Blogger Pro is where I spend a lot of time in terms of website. And then there's a Food Blogger Pro Twitter account, and then I also have a personal one, and that's Food Blogger Pro for the Twitter, and then Bjork Ostrom for my personal one. We have a Facebook too, but it's not quite as active as the Twitter.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Bjork and Lindsay, for talking with me today. I had a really great time.
Yeah,
thanks, Marla. It was really fun.
Thanks so much to Bjork and Lindsay for being my guests on the Chopped podcast today. If you have something to share about this episode, I don't know, maybe it's your favorite productivity tip or even your favorite cat video. It's possible. Please share it on the show notes page at choppedcon.com/podcast. If you like the Chopped podcast, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and give it a review on iTunes. This is something that helps the show get discovered by more people. I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational. Thanks so much for listening and have a great week.